Or so I thought. The office was quiet that morning. Too quiet for a federal building in the middle of D.C. The overhead lights buzzed softly, and the smell of burnt coffee lingered from the break room down the hall. I sat at my desk, just like I had for the past 9 years, a mid-level policy officer in the Department of Urban Development, pushing papers that rarely touched real people's lives. At least that's what I told myself. That morning, a single manila folder sat at the top of the stack. It wasn't thick. Only 3 pages inside. The top page bore the heading Directive 271C, Site Optimization Clearance, stamped with a blue, expedited label. It was flagged for fast-track authorization. I had signed dozens of these. Sometimes they had to do with removing old signage, rerouting utilities, or clearing land for infrastructure adjustments. It was all routine, all harmless. There was nothing special about the file. No warning label. No legal caveats. Just dry language. Standard relocation procedure, zoning compliance, projected net gain for traffic flow. I remember glancing at the line affected residents, 17, and pausing for less than a breath. 17. Number. Not names. Not faces. The memo said the land was classified as underutilized rural property. The term made me wince, but I didn't question it. The signature box stared back at me. I barely read the second page. I signed on the dotted line like I had 100 times before. In our office, signing things didn't feel like action. Felt like passing a baton. Another cog in the machine. My job wasn't to evaluate impact, just to ensure that all the correct boxes were checked. Legal reviewed it. Compliance approved it. My turn. I set my pen down, clipped the folder shut, and dropped it into the outgoing tray. A soft clack echoed in the stillness of the office. I leaned back, reached for my coffee, and took a sip. Burnt. That afternoon I forgot the file entirely. My inbox had already filled with 5 new ones. I never thought about that signature again. At least, not until I saw the news 2 weeks later. A quiet headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen while I was waiting for my sandwich in a deli off Constitution Avenue. 17 displaced as federal order raises historic homes in Old Bridge. Froze. The name Old Bridge rang a distant bell. I grabbed my phone, searched my inbox, and found the PDF copy of the file I had signed. There it was. Same code, Directive 271C. Same date. Same affected count, 17. The screen blurred slightly. I told myself it couldn't be the same. But the more I read, the colder I felt. My sandwich was called out. I didn't answer. I went back to the office that night. Security gave me a weird look, but I told them I left something important. I did. I dug through the system until I found the project file. All the names were there, tucked deep in the attachments. 17 people. Real ones. Old Bridge wasn't just some undeveloped zone. It was a living, breathing community. Families. Veterans. Teachers. A woman who'd lived in the same home since 1964. They were all gone now. Rooted. Because of my pen. 'Cause I signed just one paper. And that was the beginning. Bureaucracy is a strange beast. Doesn't breathe but it moves. Doesn't bleed but it kills. Not with malice. Not with intent. But with silence. With apathy. With 1,000 small decisions that pile up like snow on a roof, until the whole thing caves in. For years, I believed my work was harmless. Even noble. After all, I wasn't making laws or ordering drone strikes. I was facilitating progress. I helped infrastructure move forward. New highways, bridges, fiber optic lines, electric charging stations. Good things. Necessary things. Or so we were told. The truth. I didn't think about it that hard. Every morning, I'd badge into Building 48, ride the elevator to the 4th floor, and settle into my cubicle with its humming monitor and fluorescent glow. There were no windows. No breeze. Just the mechanical rhythm of keys tapping and phones buzzing, and the quiet, constant shuffle of papers being moved from one stack to the next. Most of us didn't read the files deeply. Not really. The language was dry, often copy-pasted from older directives. Whole paragraphs recycled through decades. We called it paper shifting. As long as the legal department cleared it and it passed compliance, no one blinked. And why would we? There were no faces attached. No human stories. Just parcels of land, zoning codes, lot numbers, projections, and deadlines. The people on the other side of the paperwork were abstractions like dots on a GIS map or population stats in a margin. You never imagine their kids. You never imagine their kitchens, or the squeak of a back porch door swinging open. I didn't, at least. Not until Old Bridge. After I saw that news crawl, I started digging. I needed to know. How many others had I signed away? I spent 2 nights combing through archived files with my badge access. I filtered for every clearance file I had ever approved. 47 in total over the last 3 fiscal years. 47. Each one marked cleared and executed. Most included a clause like the one in Directive 271C. Subject to expedited process due to regional efficiency priority. Efficiency. What a sanitized word. A word that costs nothing on a page and everything in a life. Some of the parcels had more than a dozen affected residents. One project had 64. Another was vague. Displacement estimated, TBD. Few were empty lots, I hoped. But I couldn't be sure. The more I read, the more the names blurred together. My chest tightened. My palms started to sweat in that sterile office, surrounded by forms and binders and unblinking screens. I had no idea what I had done. It was never presented to us as a moral question. It was procedural, methodical, like working at the DMV but with higher clearance. I think the system is designed that way. To keep your hands clean while your fingerprints are all over the consequences. It rewards detachment. If you stop to think, really think, about what each decision could cost, you'd never make it to lunch. You'd freeze. You'd question everything. And the machine doesn't like that. I started to remember names now. One in particular. Maya Evelyn Ramos, age 83. Widow. Property listed as non-recoverable asset in the file. In real life, that asset was her home. Her husband's ashes were buried under the fig tree in her garden. But none of that appeared in the document I signed. Just lot #241B. I thought about her that night as I drove home. Headlights gliding over dark asphalt. I thought about what she must have felt, watching a bulldozer crawl up the road she walked every day for 60 years. The ripple had started, and I was at the center of it. The deeper I went into the file for Directive 271C, the more uneasy I became. It was buried in a 142-page development plan from a private contractor called Eldon Ridge Solutions, a name I'd never heard before. They were hired under a public-private partnership initiative, basically a fast lane for getting red tape out of the way in exchange for private investment. Good on paper. But Section 12. That was where the knife was hidden. Section 12. Relocation clause for Tier C parcels. I read it over and over, stunned that I'd missed it. Or ignored it. It authorized immediate relocation of any residents whose property sat within designated expansion corridors, provided they were given minimum standard notice, and temporary federal relocation stipends not exceeding 90 days. If the recipients had nowhere to go after that. The clause was silent. No counseling. No long-term housing. No monitoring. Just a ticking clock and a bulldozer. I went back to the notice logs. Old Bridge had received their notices on a Thursday. Eviction was executed Monday morning. 4 days. That was the minimum standard. How was this legal? I started tracing the origin of the clause. Section 12 had appeared in at least 6 prior contracts, each time slightly revised. The language was crafted carefully. Always vague enough to give plausible deniability, but precise enough to let enforcement agents move in without judicial delay. The whole operation had the feel of something tested, refined, and weaponized. And no one ever said no. I looked at the signatories before me. 3 names. One was a senior project lead. Another worked in compliance. The third was someone from legal. All of them had green-lit it. I was just the final checkpoint. That's the thing about blame in government. It's never concentrated. It's diffused. Shared. So no one feels it too sharply. No one feels solely responsible. But I did now. Because I knew what was buried in those lines. Because I could still see Maya's name. Because I hadn't asked a single question when I had the chance. I imagined her again, holding that paper. Maybe it came folded in an envelope, delivered by courier. Maybe it sat unread on her kitchen table while she poured tea. Maybe she couldn't even see the fine print. Or maybe she read every word and still didn't believe it was real. Until it was. Until men in uniforms showed up with trucks and noise and permits stamped with my initials. I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. Felt like it was pressing down on me. Section 12 wasn't just legal text. It was a loaded gun. And I had pulled the trigger without looking. Strange how numbers become people once you give them space to breathe. 17 affected residents. That's what the file said. Cold. Precise. Almost mathematical. But numbers don't scream when their doors are kicked in. Numbers don't hold photo albums in shaking hands as excavators inch closer. People do. I printed the relocation records from the project archive. Each file had a name, an address, a short demographic profile, and a generic legal summary. But I needed more. So I started digging: local news reports, school rosters, business directories, obituaries. Anything. What I found wasn't 17 statistics. It was 17 stories. 1. Maya Evelyn Ramos, 83, widow. Owned her house since 1964. Local legend. Her garden was the soul of the street. She lost her husband to a mining accident in '81 and never remarried. She taught generations of neighborhood kids how to grow vegetables from scraps. Her fig tree. Planted with the ashes of her late husband. 2. Elijah Ford, 61. Retired history teacher. Walks with a cane. Decorated Vietnam War vet. Known in town for his handwritten letters to Congress. Each one beginning with, "To whom it should matter." His roof leaked, but he refused to move. 3 and 4. Erica Monroe, 34, and her son Jaden, 8, single mother. Works double shifts at the town diner. Jaden has severe asthma. The local clinic 2 blocks away was their lifeline. After the eviction, Erica quit one job to try to find housing closer to a hospital. 5. Rick Thompson, 67. Former trucker. Just retired after 42 years on the road. He'd bought a second-hand RV and was planning a cross-country trip. He never got to take it. The RV was impounded the day after the relocation notice. 6 and 7. Gloria and Tomas Silva, 70s. Cuban immigrants. Owned a small upholstery business out of their garage. They just paid off their mortgage. Gloria was in remission from breast cancer. After the eviction, they moved in with distant cousins 3 towns over. 8. Malik Jones, 19, community college student. First in his family to attend college. Worked weekends at a gas station. He tried to organize a town hall when the notice hit. No one from the agency came. 9. Emma Lynn, 52, librarian. Lived alone with her cat, Darwin. Ran the town's little free library box. Lost almost all her personal books in the clearance. 10 to 12. The Alvarez family, Manuel, 41. Teresa, 39, and their daughter Sophia, 10. Manuel worked construction. Teresa cleaned homes. Sophia was in the school science fair the week they were evicted. Her project was on urban butterflies. 13. Pastor Alan Green, 55. Ran a small chapel on the edge of the lot. Spoke at every town hall, rain or shine. The chapel was labeled a non-essential structure. It was flattened in under 2 hours. 14. Chloe Abbott, 29, tattoo artist. Ran her studio out of her converted basement. Had just launched an online store for her artwork. She documented the eviction in a series of charcoal sketches that would later go viral. 15. Walter Briggs, 82. lived alone. Former city planner. Ironically, he once helped draft zoning maps for the county in the 70s. He called the notice a death certificate with ink still drying. 16. Jamal Rivers, 46. Music teacher at the local middle school. He kept his piano in the living room by the window. It was smashed during the removal process. 17. Leah Tran, 25. Recent college grad. Moved to Old Bridge for quiet and affordability. She was on her laptop applying for teaching jobs when the eviction truck parked outside her apartment. I stared at the list for hours. They had lives, routines, memories, children, dreams, struggles, and now, scattered, displaced. Some ended up couch surfing with relatives. Others went to motels. One was reported living out of their car. No one had followed up. Because once the directive was executed, our job was done. File closed. Relocation complete. But their lives, far from it. The weight of their names pressed on me. I couldn't unsee them. Couldn't unknow what I now knew. I had signed off on their erasure. Not just from a neighborhood but from the map, like they were never there. And the worst part was all legal. Long before the demolition, before the clearance trucks arrived, Maya Evelyn Ramos had already sensed something was coming. Every morning, just after sunrise, she would walk barefoot into her backyard. Her fig tree stood tall in the center of it all, weathered, rooted deep, a quiet sentinel of the decades. Around it were rows of herbs, tomatoes, calla lilies, and wild mint she let grow unruly on purpose. Maya believed a garden should always have a little chaos to stay alive. She spoke to her plants the way most people spoke to friends. Called her roses Las Ninas. Sang to her lemon balm in Spanish lullabies. She said it helped them grow with heart. But she didn't just grow things, she taught others how to. Half the town had learned to compost because of her. Following my testimony and the increasing public attention around Directive 271C, the Congressional Subcommittee launched a formal investigation into Section 12 relocation procedures nationwide. Hundreds of cases surfaced, cases that bore an eerie resemblance to Old Bridge. Different towns, different names, same language, same silence, same damage. And with them came voices. Not many, but enough. People like Chloe Abbott, whose art had now been featured on major news outlets. People like Elijah Ford, who agreed to speak on a televised panel. People like Erica Monroe, who submitted her housing records and Jaden's hospital files to the ethics board. Their words didn't come wrapped in anger. They came wrapped in facts. Uncomfortable ones. Under mounting pressure, the Department of Urban Development issued a public acknowledgement. Certain expedited directives may have resulted in unintended community displacement without sufficient review or mitigation measures. Unintended. That word burned. Because for the people affected, the destruction was entirely intended. Signed, sealed, and executed with clinical precision. Still, it was the first sentence in the right direction. Then came the budget hearings. Then came the vote. And finally a bill. The Community Recompense Act. It wasn't perfect, but it provided direct relocation grants to verified victims of Section 12 directives. Mental health resources for displaced residents. Historic restoration funding for neighborhoods flagged under wrongful clearance. Oversight reforms, including a human impact assessment required for all future directives. Most importantly, it opened the door for legal review of past demolitions. It didn't bring Old Bridge back, but it put it on the record. It made forgetting harder. The 17 were among the first to receive letters. Some had moved, and the letters took time to find them. Rick Thompson received his notice while parked near the edge of the Grand Canyon. He folded it and kept it in the glove box of his RV. Sofia Alvarez's parents cried when they opened theirs. The relief wouldn't replace what they'd lost, but it helped them finally stop moving. Maya Ramos's check was delivered to the assisted living facility. A nurse helped her read it. She said nothing. But the next morning she asked for a pack of fig seeds. Elijah Ford donated half of his to a community literacy fund. He told me in a handwritten note. They can't refund memory, but they can learn to stop destroying it. I was asked to help draft the internal policy reform documents. Said yes, but only if we included a clause named for what really mattered. The old bridge provision. It requires a 90-day community consultation period before any relocation directive. It mandates that individual names, not parcel numbers, be listed on internal review forms. It forces someone to ask, "Who lives here?" before a signature ever touches paper. They let it through. But real. I visited the empty field once more, this time with a legal team and 2 representatives from the department. We walked the perimeter. We read the plaque someone had installed near the road. Here stood Old Bridge. A community cleared but not forgotten. Let this ground remember what paper tried to erase. One of the reps asked if I'd signed it. Said no. But I knew who did. It began with a signature. Just a flick of the pen, a practice gesture. My initials in the bottom corner of a form I didn't fully read. A name I didn't recognize, authorizing the erasure of lives I never met. And now here we are. 17 people. 17 stories. 17 universes that collided with mine through a single page. People ask me if I regret it. And the answer is yes. But not only for what I did. For what I didn't do. I didn't ask questions. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't see the humans behind the file. And that's the most dangerous kind of blindness. The kind that wears professionalism like armor and calls detachment efficiency. You don't expect your legacy to be shaped by silence. But mine was. For 9 years, I never once asked who was on the other side of the ink. Now I ask every day. Not because I'm trying to be a hero, but because I refuse to be a ghost again. A ghost in someone else's tragedy, haunting lives I never had the courage to see. I still remember the sound of the bulldozers. Even though I wasn't there in person, I've heard them in my mind ever since. Every time I see a new directive. Every time I open a file with too few pages and too much power. Hear them. And I remember the garden. And the butterfly drawings. And the cane leaning on the porch rail. And the broken teacup handle I left behind like an offering. They stay with me. They have to. That's the price of awakening. Sometimes I still drive by the site. There's a new development sign now. Future site of Ridgeview Commons. Luxury rentals coming 2026. Progress, they call it. But I see something else. I see a field that will never be empty, no matter what they build on it. Because the souls of Old Bridge linger. Not as ghosts, but as memory, as resistance, as echo. You can't bury truth beneath concrete. Has a way of rising. I don't sign blindly anymore. Not ever. I read. Listen. Pause. And when the line for approval appears, I write something else above it. Who lives here? It's become a rule. Ritual. Quiet rebellion. Because I know now. Every paper we touch touches someone else. And one signature can build a school. One can cancel a lifeline. One can start a war or stop it. One can change 17 lives. And if I've learned anything, it's this. A signature may only take a second, but it can take a lifetime to understand what it meant.